I love seeing where everyone's calling in from. We got Maryland. I saw it looked like Turkey, Chicago, Maine, rather chilly Maine, Ghana, Italy, San Diego, Brooklyn, Ecuador. Strategy certainly has a global reach. Kenya, it's exciting. Yep. Again, if you're just joining us, drop into chat, say hello, where you're calling in from. Boston. I think we're going to have a great session today. Hello, London. Right back at you. Sweet. All right, as people are joining, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I am Jeff Brunnings. I am today's host for the Chief Strategy Officer Collaborative. We are based in Reno, Nevada. I drive both growth and development for On Strategy, and I'm also a senior strategist, which means I roll up my sleeve. I work alongside leadership of organizations in the thoughtful design, deployment, adoption of strategy. So thank you all for joining us today. We have 1 hour and we always make it super action-packed and thoughtful, practical and pragmatic. And what I want to do is, so today's topic, we are talking about the culture of change. This is the intersection where strategy meets change management. And super excited, we have some great speakers today. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what is change management, what is its role in supporting the adoption of strategy. We're also going to be doing hearing stories from the field. So we have some organizations today that are going to be sharing their experiences of change management and its impact on the adoption of strategy. Again, here's our flow for today real quick. So we're going to do a real quick few minutes on a kind of a grounding level setting on the Chief Strategy Officer Collaborative. Many of you have participated in the months past, in the weeks past. I would imagine a lot of you are joining us for the first time. So welcome if you're joining the CSO Collaborative for the first time today. So I'm spend a few minutes on what is it, how we work together, and certainly the bulk of our time today is going to be what we call the masterclass. We have a special partner, ally, friend of On Strategy, OneSource, which is going to be sharing the masterclass section of today on change management. What is it and why is it important? And then we also have several organizations today that are going to be sharing their experiences in change management and in the context of strategy and adoption. So that's going to be the flow for today. Then real quick, going into, we are excited to have you. For those of you who've been with us before, and some of you that are new for the first time. So we have two fundamental reasons why we come together as a group. First of all, this is a group of peers. We are like-minded people who have a passion for strategy, the impact strategy has within our organization, the adoption, keeping it a living, breathing process. And who is on today's call? All of you. We lead strategy for the organizations that we represent. We're either seasoned or we're aspiring to be that seasoned strategist. This is a group of like-minded individuals and your peers. So this is a safe brain trust to share ideas and experiences. And certainly we are here because there's no other place where we can come together as strategists to sharpen our skills, learn, develop, and master our profession in strategy. That's why we're here today. And a little bit, so we're up to like a total of 900 members of the Chief Strategy Officer Collaborative. I think there's already over like 100 on this call already today. Super exciting. So you can see this is a group that has global reach. There are consultants, there are seasoned professionals, those that are aspiring. And what's really exciting is this is representing all sectors, whether it's government, nonprofit, in the service sector, for-profit, corporate. Really exciting because at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarities in good strategy is simply good strategy, regardless if we're in government or education or nonprofit. So we have a lot of shared experiences and approaches, and that's why we're all here. So real quick, we meet 4 times a month, and it's always on Thursdays. This is what we call the first Thursday of each month. We'll be introducing a topic which kind of really transcends into the rest of the month. And so the focus for February is the intersection of strategy and change management. So we'll be doing a deep dive today. The second, third, and fourth Thursdays are for our Chief Strategy Officer Pro members. This is where smaller, intimate groups, a lot more Q&A, sharing best practices, really a peer group opportunity to bring to the table thoughts, concerns, challenges that you're having right now in your role. We bring it, we workshop it together, we come out with solutions and answers. I'll get more into CSO Pro at the end of today's presentation, but with that, what I do want to transition into real quick, operating principles. We give something, we take something, no solicitation. I think the most important part of this is be engaged, focused, ask questions. We can slam questions into chat. We'll get to as many questions as we can during the presentation, as well as after the presentation. Many of those questions we bring into next Thursday's session and the Thursday after that and throughout the month of February. So this is how we operate together as a group. And with that, I want to start real quick on this topic, and we're going to put up a poll real quick and take a couple moments and answer the question, what has been your experience with the adoption of change management in the context of strategy? Your choices: none, I've never thought about it; 2, I'm somewhat aware of the role change management might play in strategy; 3, somewhat adopted. We adopt them together occasionally, sometimes yes, sometimes no, or the 4th, yeah, we always do it together. Looking at live results right now. So far, it looks like, very cool. Pretty even spread between heard that they can be used together. That's about 23%, 32%, adopt them together occasionally, and overwhelmingly 40% always use strategy with change management together. So that's really exciting. I think we can, hey, Ryan, can we close out that poll and make sure that it's being published so everybody has a view of it? If not, I think, there's our results right there. Very cool. Okay, so that's it. 25% heard they can be used together. About a third is we adopt them together occasionally, and about almost half consistently using change management together with strategy in both the design and the adoption. So that's pretty cool. Very, very cool. All right. Moving on. Today's topic, the culture of change. We're going to transition into our master class. We're going to talk about the, well, first, I'm going to really head this off with Vernee. We have our guest speaker today is Vernee Jones-Seals, CEO of OneSource. She's going to spend some time doing grounding on what is change management in the context of strategy and adoption. Vernee is also going to share out some of the most common misconceptions we might have, as well as some of the core obstacles that we might experience in the role change management plays in strategy. So with that, I want to introduce Vernee Jones-Seals with OneSource. Vernee, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. So I'm very excited about this opportunity to chat. I'd love to see the comments that are coming in already about change management. And I'm actually blown away at 40% of the folks attending. actually integrate change management and strategic planning. So we should have some great dialogue today.
Yeah, it's really exciting. That was a pleasant surprise to see that the group on today's call is not only familiar with change management, but is applying it in the context of strategy and adoption. So that is fantastic. Cool. So, Vernay, why don't you do some level setting? What is change management in the context of strategy, tools, processes, approaches, and why is it so important?
Great, will do. So change management, I've spent the majority of my career, over 30 years, working with organizations and across many different industries. And I have to say, I have not worked with any organization that was not going through continual change. The challenge, though, is that that the process and the tool and the methodologies to make sure that that change is successful was always the issue. So what is change management? It is really this process of how we move our people through this process of change, being led by various different strategic objectives and initiatives, and then the methodologies that we can make sure that we apply that are going to be extremely successful. So it is the people side of the change. We spend a lot of time in strategic planning, building out the structure. And I always use the example of, if you think about a design build firm or a construction or an architecture and engineering, where you have a master plan, you have a schematic plan, and I always equate that to kind of like a strategic plan. But then you have to think about, how you're going to engineer the structure. But what's often left at the end is, how are people going to move through the structure? How are people going to move through the building that you're building, whether it's a house or a commercial space? And we're going to talk about it in the context of an organization. So in strategic planning, we're building out this structure, but then we need to really focus on the change management of how do we get the people to move through these changes that we're building in an organization. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is based on a proven methodology, which is the ProSci methodology as we move forward. And we look at some of the research that has been done over almost 30 years in terms of putting tools and methodologies and structure together based on this ProSci model. And the fundamental of this model is really based on what we call the ADKAR. And so when we look at that methodology that ProSci has spent 30 years developing, this is something that we engage our clients with and companies that we work with through this model. So this model of how do we manage the change? We understand what it is in terms of its importance based on the results we got from the poll. But I'll be curious of those who did answer in that 40%, how many really do use a solid methodology for the change management. So as we go through the ADKAR model, it's really about the awareness and that need for change. I think there was someone in the chat who talked about being able to move the people along with the change and the communication and the understanding, and maybe being responsible because people didn't know. So they didn't have the information, they weren't aware. So oftentimes they know a change is coming, but they don't know why. Right? So part of the change management is really making sure we answer the why. So awareness is where it starts, that desire to participate in the change and to come along with the change. And everyone comes along at their own cadence, but we're going to talk about how we can move that more in line from an organizational standpoint. But that desire is going to come from when people know what's in it for them. You've heard of the WIFM before. I think someone just put that in the chat. It's great. So this desire to participate in the change. So this is where we have to engage our change agents, our change champions to be leaders. But what's really important is that this comes from the top. I always talk about the tone from the top when we talk about building a culture of change. So what is that tone from your sponsorship that you're getting from your executives in the organization? And that's going to be needed in terms to be able to get buy-in. Obviously, we need this knowledge on how we're going to change. And this ability is the skills and the behavior that this process is going to move us through. And then, of course, you're always going to have resistance. And so how do we work with the resistance and how do we reinforce this change? So as we move through this process, we're going to talk through what are some of those misconceptions. Now, this team seems to be, a group of people seem to be well equipped with the concepts of change management and integrating it, but there are some misconceptions there about change management. And so we're going to, as we move forward, walk through some of those misconceptions and talk through those. And I'm sure I'll be getting some responses through the chat as well as we move forward to the next slide. So 3 of the major misconceptions is that you can control this change without a plan. So again, very curious of the group here that seems to be very well versed, how many actually have a change management process and an actual plan. And some of those plans are that sponsor plan, that communication plan, the training plans. And so that's a misconception that we don't need all of that, right? It's just going to come along, it's going to happen. We put that strategic objective out there and we're just going to charge forward. We really don't have a plan. We've got KPIs. We want to be able to monitor it. We've got goals. We really don't have a plan about how we're going to move together the people in an organization. The other misconception is that resistance is bad, right? Let's be real. Not everyone wants to come along for the ride, right? And obviously, if they don't understand the why and what's in it for them, you're going to have resistance. It's not bad. It really is going to help you understand where the work is that needs to be done in your organization in terms of that resistance. So I'd love to be able to monitor that resistance. This is where you have your champions and your change agents and your early adopters of these initiatives to help you through working through that resistance. And that the no news is good news. Well, that's not true when you're trying to move an organization through major transformation. And I think most of us would agree we're all going through some form of a transformation over these past couple of years. So the no news is good news. Misconception, we need awareness, right? We need awareness to drive from the very top. You saw that in the ADKAR model. So I want to propose that as we're going through this change in our organizations continually, that we want to be successful about this change. So with that is this concept of this culture of change around integrating strategic planning and change management. And so many of you have heard it, many of you are applying it today, but I want to talk about it as we move forward in a little bit more detail in terms of this planning cycle that we're in. So remember, going back to the example that I used about, this architectural design, this schematic that we're putting in place, and that these documents that how we're going to construct, right, the strategic planning in an organization. What are we going to do in terms of those initiatives? What are going to be our goals? How are we going to measure those goals? All those things, we're doing our SWOT analysis. We're taking a look at what's working, where our strengths and weaknesses are, where our opportunities and threats. But at the same time, I'd like to introduce this concept of the people involved, right? So oftentimes when we're doing the strategic planning, it's a very small group or committee. But we want to open that up. We want to expand that to include our champions for this change, our champions, our agents who are going to create awareness, that are going to be part of preparing for the change in our phase 1 of change management. And then, of course, those individuals are very much engaged as we move through the managing the change, right? And also being able to sustain those outcomes. So I believe that if we're going to see success, right, from that sponsorship from the top, which is where you get that triangle there, and that when you get the people involved and you get your various projects or initiatives, that the way to get to that success triangle is to integrate this strategic planning along with the ADKAR model and this phase 3 approach to preparing for the change, managing it, as well as sustaining the change and managing that resistance. This is the foundation for a culture for change in an organization. This change could be coming from a variety of different reasons in an organization, which we're going to hear about that from the field a little bit later here this morning. But I do believe that this all equates to where we want to go in terms of this culture for change. So this integration of strategy and change management equals our culture for change. So as we move forward and look at what does this mean, what are some of these key drivers that are really causing us to take on this and build out this culture for change? And some of those key drivers are going to be coming from our customers from a change management perspective, our capabilities where we maybe need to expand. We're all looking at our businesses differently after the pandemic and looking for ways that we can be competitive. And obviously with automation, we're looking at our technology platforms, and these are some of the key drivers. And we know that the drivers, with the strategic planning is really on our tactical approaches. We gather some of those drivers when we go through our SWOT analysis, right? We really get an understanding of who we are as an organization. And when we look through the lens of the strategy and the change management, we're constantly trying to assess where are we today? Where do we want to be in the future? So our strategy is helping us to see, here are the goals we want to set. Here is the objectives we're going to set. Here are the KPIs, everything we're going to build out, right? Again, that infrastructure, that schematic. But then how do we get the people to come along with us, right, in our organization? How do we successfully move together with this cadence? And we want to talk a little bit more about some of the obstacles that we face in being able to do. So, as we look at some of the three major obstacles for this integration of change management, is this, as I spoke to earlier, right, this absence of executive support and active sponsorship. It must be active from the top. I know many of us have strategic plans. We've been doing it for years, and it becomes like this stagnant document, right? And we have to ask ourselves why. We're always trying to understand the why. So one major obstacle, which in, of course, how we can overcome that, is getting that executive support from the top. When everyone in the organization sees that tone from the top, sees that support, they're engaged, see how you've engaged others in terms of your change agents and champions and early adopters, you're going to be able to overcome those obstacles. The lack of alignment and effective communication, a need for a communication plan. Who's the audience? Who are we speaking to in your organization? What level are we speaking to those individuals? And what's the cadence and the frequency in which we're sharing that information? Remember, I said earlier, the no news is good news is a misconception, right? So limited change with buy-in can create employee resistance. Absolutely. But I think the more you build on that ADKAR model, the more you will demystify that resistance to change in an organization. So just quickly, we want to talk about how do you get to this success? How do you get to the building blocks in the model of moving individuals through this change? We all are going from our current state to our future state. The journey is through the transition. And guess what? Sometimes it's painful, right? Sometimes you're going to come against even more change as you move along, but that's okay. Again, this is the importance and the reasons of why we would need a plan. And then we are really ultimately trying to take our individuals from this current state as a group and move them through to this future state. But every individual has their own why, has their own WIFM. And we have to pace ourselves out with these plans and this methodology to be able to move in a cadence together so that we can really see what we call success. And so when we look at the integration of change management and the strategy and why it's important, we can see the difference in the two different models as we move forward in this current state and future state. When we've integrated the change management and the strategic planning, we'll see on the next slide where we can see a completely filled out box of what can be successful. When we do not integrate it, we come out of this change management with, you can see the turbulence, right? That you'll see in that transition stage. And what will happen in terms of the future state is that you're kind of we have what we call the Swiss cheese. And this gives you less than success, right? Less than those goals that you set. And this is currently, I think, what a lot of organizations are actually dealing with today. And we want to be able to bring about, this concept of a culture, building a culture for change, so that we will see more of that top model of success versus the Swiss cheese of the future state. And so not adopting this change is allowing us to kind of stay where we are, right? And not really successfully move forward. So we want to be able to not fall into this Swiss cheese. And we want to be able to actually overcome some of these obstacles in terms of increasing our return on the investment. It takes a lot of time and resources and money to move through transformation and organization. We want to see the adoption. It's all about the user acceptance and the adoption. And you can see why it's important to have these plans in place and have a well thought out methodology. So we'll just touch very quickly before we go to the field here shortly. And hear from some of our client experiences. But I just want to touch on some of the results that we have for not implementing the culture of change. And you're going to have this information to look at it more in detail, but cost and risk at the top, right? At the very top, it's costing us time, it's costing us money, it's costing us perhaps retention. It will be an issue of people leaving, turnover, things of that nature. And so we want to be able to mitigate this risk. We want to be able to mitigate the cost. And again, building out this culture of change will allow us to do this. So there's also something we call a multiplier effect, some of the benefits that you'll get when we do incorporate this change. And we've seen, and the research has shown us, that what happens when you actually do integrate this change. And so we call this the 3 or 6 time multiplier. And so we see the percentages of organizations who do a pretty good job of integrating this change management and strategic planning kind of see a 3 times multiplier. But you see over the graph here, the more you implement this, the more you successfully implement it, I should say, is the greater of that multiplier effect that you do get, the greater the outcome you see. You see less of that Swiss cheese and you see more of that solid future state where we're heading. So at this point, Jeff, I think what we want to do is kind of turn this session into hearing from the field and hearing from some of our clients.
Yeah, let's hear stories from the field, real experiences, real challenges, real solutions. And I'll let you introduce our first guest organization and our next guest speaker to talk about experiences from the field.
Awesome, great. Well, again, just thank you to the audience for taking the time to even attend and listen to the masterclass. And I hope there was some nuggets there for some great takeaway. And we have even more as we hear from the field and hear from some of these experiences. So I want to introduce a colleague that we've had the opportunity to work with, a firm out of the Boston, Massachusetts area. It is a architecture and interior design firm. Rachel Woodhouse, who is the principal and director of operations. We've had the opportunity to work very closely over the years, building out strategic plan for their organization, as well as being able to also integrate change management through the process. So I will turn it over to Rachel. And what we'd like to, Rachel's going to be sharing with us is a few things around some of the biggest challenges that she's experienced and her firm has experienced through this transformation. Also, what were some key takeaways of things that they had to start doing and some things they had to stop doing. So Rachel, as you take us through your journey that you had for legacy planning, if you can enlighten us with what that experience was like for you and your organization.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here as part of this group. It's really exciting. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, as Renee knows. We are, as Renee said, we have a 50+ year history in the Boston area. We've also expanded to the Southeast with an Atlanta office. We're an architecture and interior design firm. And my partner and I, Brent Ziegler, came into ownership from a sole owner and starting in 2015. We represent the 3rd generation of ownership. So our risk, Renee and I talk about this a lot, what's the risk of not changing, was closing this firm with a great legacy. If we didn't adapt to the way we were going to run the firm, the way we were going to be profitable and successful going forward, we couldn't assume that what worked for our predecessor was going to work for us. So we ran through an entire a long strategy formulating process under Brené's guidance and using On Strategy as a tool. And that was about so many things. And really what Brent and I realized right away was that we needed to build a team and a pipeline of leadership because we needed to continue that pipeline without stopping. So what really the going through the strategy process did for us was built our relationships with our senior leaders. And it was really allowed us to get to know each other in this focused environment as we ran through the process. We understood what was important to each other, how each other communicated, because, when you're in the fast pace of your daily lives, you have to trust each other as co-leaders. And so going through this process, I think one of the surprising outcomes for us was we were really able to build trust within the leadership team and get on the same page. So not only were we doing strategy for ourselves and our firm, this is also a service that we provide for our clients because a lot of what we do is corporate interior workplace, and every change in the workplace right now is necessarily got a lot of weight on it. So we have taken what we've learned about change management and supplemented those services for our clients. So we kind of have a dual view on change management. And so I would say one of the things that we learned most importantly is rarely are you given a change fully baked and told to implement. So what we found is so important is running a change management approach or strategy side by side while you're developing the change, so that your team who's going to be impacted by it hears this drip, drip, drip of communication, so that when it comes out, they're not surprised. They knew this was happening. And that would be one of the things I would say I would advise to start right now, is to start with what I call we are here communications. And as we are designers, we like to think about iterating a lot. We talk a lot about iterating and piloting. And we have Dyer Brown has a culture of, we're going to try something, and then we're going to seek input, and we're going to test it, and we're going to see, and we're going to tweak it if it doesn't work, right? So fortunately, as designers, we kind of come hardwired for iteration. But I think telling people, here's the current state, let's just acknowledge the current state and why we need to change, where we're trying to get to, and how you intersect with it. You team members daily and on the ground, how you intersect with this all along the way, right? So I think today, starting this we are here communication and taking that risk of saying, we don't have it all figured out. We're working on it. We're going to need your help. Here's the places where we're going to need your input. And that's easier or harder for different organizations. One thing I wanted to comment on, go back on one of your comments, Renee, around having a fully thought out change management plan, which I think is absolutely true. But I don't think that necessarily has to equate high complexity, right? Because sometimes you can say, we're trying to figure out the strategy, and now we're pausing to figure out what the change management strategy is going to be. And now we're all turning in circles. It can be a simple, streamlined plan. It just needs to be intentional, right? Thoughtful, intentional, that you lay on top of your strategy while you're doing it. Because again, we don't have the luxury of waiting until it's done before we communicate.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point, Rachel. And I know that during a lot of our sessions of working together, it's that tendency to kind of want to hesitate and say, well, let's finish this first, right? And then so sometimes within that group that's actually leading the change, there's resistance even with that group, right?
Exactly. Resistance is sneaky that way, right? It comes in all
forms and fashion. Mm-hmm. It does. But having, I think you touched on something that was just really critical, which is building trust, right? You need that in an organization, period. We come together to work on a daily basis on a variety of issues and different agendas, but you must have trust. And you can't have that if we're not communicating, if we're not all communicating on the why and the timing on what's important. Like even with strategic planning, we come up with these initiatives, these objectives, but timing of them, right? I've certainly experienced this in my own family. It's saying, yes, we're going to do that, but it's going to be 6 months from now, right? It's not today. That's not the critical thing today that's bringing us risk. And that's some of the assessments that we do as well in this process, is really determining where is the highest risk, right? And that's where we need to address first. But if everyone understands that, then we can get greater buy-in. And again,
right. It's like sharing the context, right? That leaders often take for granted because we're stewing in it. Yeah. And the people who are working with you and side by side, they're not sitting in the same stew that you are necessarily mentally. So giving them the context of the big picture, if you think about that resistance to change, it's based in fear. So much of what people want is just information. They just want to know, well, like, are we talking about a year? Or are we talking about 6 months? Are we talking about a wholesale change? Or, just giving people context, I think, goes such a long way to mitigating resistance.
Yeah. And Vernay and Rachel, there's so many things being dropped into chat that are questions and affirmations and confirmations. And I noticed one that I wanted to ask the both of you real quick is thoughts, critical considerations, must-dos for those organizations that are right now going through rapid change, super quick shifts with, right now in the moment. How can we quickly adopt a change management perspective to allow the adoption of that rapid change that's happening right now in our company?
Vernay, I would say first, decide if at all and how the team is going to inform this change, right? At what point do they get to step in and inform it? And let them know. If that's 6 months from now, let them know that now, right? I think communicate the imperfect message at the perfect time. Risk those communications, because as Vernay was saying, you can often stumble because you say, well, this isn't quite right. We're not quite formed. This isn't quite perfectly crafted. And if you communicate also through different channels, I think is really important, multiple channels of communication and modes. I think tell people what's going on now and what you're working on, and let them know how you think they're going to be able to participate.
Right. And I would couple that, Rachel, with saying, go back to building trust, right? So you can't have trust without transparency. And so be transparent about this challenge you're going through, right? You don't have to share any, highly sensitive, confidential information, but be transparent with your leaders and your key stakeholders and those who you will engage as champions and as change agents, because that's where the trust starts to build. And then you have to assess the risk, right? Everything can't be a fire, right? Everything can't be the fire that we're trying to put out today, but there are assessments that you can go through and take your organization through and determine what level of risk. So starting where your highest level of risk is, right? So creating the transparency, acknowledge where you are, acknowledge that current state, right? Communicate the current state, communicate that you're going to go through this process of engaging and empowering your team members, right, to be part of this change with you, that you don't have all the answers, which is why you need this engagement from different key leaders in the organization. So just starting there with acknowledging that and being transparent and building that trust and building that engagement to empower others.
Excellent. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
That was awesome. So let's transit. Let's hear another story from the field.
Awesome. So we're going to have another story from the field from two great people who are from BDO. And those of you who do not know BDO, it's one of the top premier accounting, tax, audit consulting firm. It's been around more than 100 years. And so we're going to be hearing today from the National Regional Advisory Market Leader and also the Business Resource Network Relationship Manager. And they're going to take us through their journey, answering some of the same questions. But their focus was on their alliance group, which we happen to be a member of, OneSource, and their DEI focus. And they're going to talk through some of the same things. What were some of the biggest challenges? What, did they realize they needed to start doing and stop doing? And also touching on to where they've seen some success with the outcomes of this. So I'll hand this over to Carl and Danielle.
Thanks, Brene. BDO has a long-standing commitment to supporting a wide range of employees and clients and communities, including those that have been historically underrepresented. And as a firm, we're undertaking broader DEI initiatives with the support of our CEO, leadership, and our Chief Diversity Officer. Danielle and I are going to be speaking today specifically on the case study of our work as change agents / champions to bring change management approaches to the BDO Alliance strategy for DEI.
Danielle.
Hope everyone can hear me.
Yeah, yes. We can hear you. Hi,
Thank
Danielle.
You for having Carl and I. Let me tell you a little bit about this BDO Alliance. As Brene mentioned, BDO, accounting, tax, consulting, your typical accounting firm, meat and potatoes firm. But from BDO USA is this extension called the BDO Alliance USA. BDO, today, we're huge. 30 years ago, we were not as huge. So that we had clients in places where we did not have a physical BDO office. We decided, well, let's partner up with these local regional firms that are in these areas where we have these clients, and we will partner up with them and we will provide the best service to our clients, because at the end of the day, that's the goal. We want to provide best client service. We did this 30 years ago, and today we are 400 of these partnerships that we formed in these regions. OneSource is a part of this BDO Alliance as a business resource network firm. We have CPA firms, but we also have these business resource network firms that are providing these non-client type, these non-accounting tax types of services, other professional services, consultative services. That is where we brought in this business resource network. These firms are providing these niche services that perhaps BDO themselves don't even provide.
So just to run quickly through the three stages here. The current state of BDO's DEI work with our alliance firms is mostly in that shape with the early stages of the ADKAR method. We have some business outcomes where we have reached the reinforcement stage. So our current stage, I would say, is a mix of those our current state is a mix of those ADKAR stages, mostly in the early and middle stages. To generalize, I'd say we see the awareness and desire being driven by the changes that our employees want to see. That's one of the important whys. As well as DEI requirements that are coming increasingly from our clients at larger private equity firms, public companies, governmental entities, nonprofits, foreign clients, places where ESG is a more routine part of doing business. And, Brene guided us through a SWOT analysis, similar to how she was showing that earlier. But then also, we have this ADKAR model where, we're trying to figure out, using that model, where we are in different parts of our journey. So that's where I'd say our current state is.
And I guess I will talk about the future state. For the BDO Alliance, the BDO Alliance's DEI initiative, this is about revenue. You want to drive a significant amount of revenue as you can. In order to do that, you need to have clients. So we want to drive a more upstream type of clients to our alliance firms. That will hopefully result in more diverse, more rewarding types of workplaces. People don't want to just come to work anymore. And I think that we are seeing that now more than ever before. People want their voices to be heard. People have different perspectives, and they want that to be valued. So we will see the transition, right? So now I'm working backwards. The transition will involve more investments in training, more investments in recruiting, more investments in tools. And to bring all of that together, there has to be that concise and clear and consistent communication.
And Carl and Danielle, what were some of the biggest challenges you've experienced so far in the?
So Jeff, you went on mute there, so I'll just pick that question up in terms of some of the biggest challenges that you face going through this transformation, right? So this transformation lens for BDO is through the BDO Alliance and the DEI initiatives, and you did an assessment of your current state and you kind of mapped out your future state. But as you're working through, and currently, as you said, your early stage, Carl, what are some of the challenges? Danielle, you pointed out, communication has really been big and being able to communicate.
I'm sorry, everyone.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, great.
So what are the challenges?
So the biggest challenge, these big organizations, a lot of hierarchy, a lot of different levels of power. We need that balance. We are looking for that balance between enough resources, but at the same time, we don't want it to be so broad. BDO and all of our 400 BDO Alliance members. So that is what forced us to take a piece of it. let's just work with our Black-owned alliance firms and see specifically how we could start to drive this change. That is where OneSource came in and helped us take a better look at this initiative that we're trying to push forward. Change management and having that structured plan, that strategic plan. I was one of those folks who responded to the poll as I heard of it going together. It's not something that I initially thought would fit together. Working with OneSource, however, oh, I see how it fits. I get it now.
And thank you, Danielle. I think this goes back to one of the questions we had in the chat also, Jeff, if I may, and it was about, how do you, some of the things that they see from leadership, right? In terms of the transparency, the empowerment, the engagement, right? They're all buzzwords and we get it. But what's effective? Like you have to start to illustrate what that looks like. And I know that some of the work we were doing with BDO is that we started to illustrate, right? You have to be intentional about it. There has to be a purpose for what you're doing in terms of the strategy behind it. But then we need to illustrate, number one, what's the risk of doing nothing, right? If we just keep doing the same thing, right? When we talk about those risk assessments. So being able, the transparency is to be able to see and look through the lens of where we are today, right? And engaging a group of people to be honest about, can we run these assessments, right? So something tangible that will help you create that transparency, and something tangible that will help you to be able to also bring the communication. And so as we talk about that, this is where these organizational assessments from a change management perspective are so important, and as a takeaway in terms of things what we would suggest to start doing, and the stop doing. The stop doing is stop, saying that we can't, right? We know we've got opposition. We know we've got obstacles. We know we've got challenges, but we have to forge forward and try to build a path forward for a change. So these assessments are very helpful in terms of, and there's several different assessments. This is just one we're sharing. That will allow us to start to get an understanding of where people are from your leadership down in an organization. And again, those scores are put on a matrix to really help you understand a couple of different things around risk to your organization, right? What happens if you don't change, if you don't start doing various things? So that's one tool. And this is why the change management tool and methodology is so important, that we're not just talking, we're actually putting together some foundation to be able to build the building blocks of that ICAR and be able to move an organization forward through change. So that's one assessment. The other is the communication checklist, right? Who are we communicating with? Why are we communicating? Again, why are we changing? What's in it for everyone involved? What's in it for the leaders? What's in it for the sponsors, right? And the more you talk about risk and understanding the cost of that risk at that level, the more important it is, and you can get greater buy-in to that change. But these are two key things that I would, personally and professionally suggest that we can start with some tools. I think we've heard great feedback from BDO. Again, thank you both, Carl and Danielle, for your feedback and comments and your experience and your journey. Very different than the journey we heard from Rachel with Daya Brown and through their legacy planning. And so I will turn it back over to you, Jeff. I don't know if we have more polls or other questions from our audience that we'd like to address.
Yeah, if we have some questions, we have a few minutes, we can address some questions. I know there was an earlier question kind of stemming from a point that you made that, it needs to start with leadership, that clear, focused, trusting, trustful communication. How does that then cascade to mid-management? So mid-management is then carrying that torch forward, and then how does it carry down to staff? Just the thoughts of what happens after it starts with leadership, then what?
All right. Yeah. So what's interesting about this, and this is why the integration of this with change management is so important. So the question would be, where is leadership in the strategic planning process? So where is leadership when you are going through defining what those strategic objectives are, what those initiatives are, right? So if leadership is involved there, that's the first step in terms of engaging that executive sponsorship. They need to understand what it is you're doing, how you intend to go about doing it, and why it's important. And that is, and also engaging some of the assessments to say to your leadership, here is the risk if we do nothing. Here's the risk if we don't integrate change management, if we don't bring the people along with it, that we need to now get to middle management and engage them as our champions, as our change agents, right? We need to get early adopters involved. We went through this with an organization who thought they could just handle all the change at the top level. And we immediately said, that's not going to work, right? You need to be able, when we did the assessments and they realized that half of the middle management did not even understand why they were changing or what was changing in the organization, they early on realized from that assessment that they were going to have a challenge moving through that strategic objective, that transformation around technology that they were going to deploy.
Right. Any additional thoughts and considerations? You've mentioned several times that there are going to be parts of our organizational strategy that reflect the highest risk, the risk of resistance based on perceptions and attitudes and behaviors. How can we quickly identify these are the areas of the greatest risk within our strategic plan that we need to focus our change management on, rather than change management for the entire adoption of the entire strategy itself?
Right. So I think every objective has its own sub change management, sub risk assessment, right? So we're not just proposing that there's a high global risk assessment, but each one of those objectives, when you look through your strategic plan, you have to run kind of a mini assessment to say, what's my risk here, right? And if this one yields the highest risk, this is where we're going to need to start taking more of those tactical strategic steps around integrating change management. So you do have to look through the lens at each level and throughout those objectives and throughout your organization. There are going to be various departments, right? You may be having a technology concern around cybersecurity. You could be having another one around, hey, we've lost a client, it's a financial management risk, right? And you have to assess those differently, right? You can run them simultaneously in terms of your next steps that you need to take, but they will require a different approach, right? And a different approach to where you are in the ADKAR model for each one, right? The financial group may have all the awareness they need to know about that. They just don't have the knowledge and the ability to change it, right? They need a new system, right? Whereas your other issue around, being able to deal with cybersecurity is that you don't have the technical capabilities that you need in place. That's a different response to that assessment around your cybersecurity example.
Renee, can I add to that too?
Yes.
On the people side, right, and prioritizing where your risk lives. And then I think on the people side, one thing that we say to our clients a lot, we are advocates of bringing together a cross section of team members at different points. And what we advise to our clients is invite the squeaky wheel. The squeaky department, right? If you have a department that is particularly resistant and they're entrenched in what they do, and that's the problem, right? Invite them and just go at it. Because when you convert those people to, adopting the idea first, long before the action, they are really strong advocates.
Yes.
And so invite those people who are going to be resistors.
I think that's a great point, Rachel. I think when you can address that major resistor in the room and convert them to be your early adopter or your change agent, you're on your way, right? So I think we have to, we get nervous about that and a little anxious about it, right? It's like we just don't want everybody to see, what's wrong or hear about what's wrong in an organization. But we're all here together to build something greater, right, and better. And so I think it's, from a leadership standpoint, we have to get over that that feeling that, our weakness is going to be exposed. Right?
No. Thank you so much, Vernee, Rachel, Carl, Danielle. We have a few minutes left, so I'm going to do a quick wrap, but hopefully all of you can stay on maybe for a few additional minutes after we formally close, because I know there's a handful of questions that we didn't have a chance to get to that I'd love to answer. So hang tight. What I do want to just bring it back just a little bit. So here's our programming. We are in the month of February. Yay, February. We're talking about the culture of change all month long. This is our introduction of the topic of the role change management plays in strategy and the adoption of strategy. We'll be getting together next Thursday. That is a workshopping specific challenges, concerns, obstacles we're facing in our organization today, both in the context of change management, but we also open it up if there are any things immediate top of mind. Next Thursday is our kind of workshop, a topic together as a group of peers. So we'll be doing that the second and fourth Thursday, and then on the third Thursday of the month, we will be kind of doing an additional very focused workshop on change management, getting into kind of really the tactical, practical application of change management. And then next quarter, starting in March, that is focused on running killer quarterly reviews and quarterly refreshes. Again, if you like today, and you want more of it, you can get more of it. You can tap into all the additional Thursdays. That is being a member of the Chief Strategy Officer Pro. What you get is immediate gut checks on thoughts, considerations, concerns, challenges you're having right now in your role in strategy within your organization. So we'll be doing a lot of like peer reviews, we're workshopping stuff. So those are all the subsequent Thursdays. Today is open to not only pro members, but to everyone. We allow today's session to be open to all. If you like what you heard, you want more of it, become a pro member, tap into us every Thursday, every single month, where we do peer group sessions. They're really awesome if you haven't already participated in it. It is a membership base. We're running a discount right now. I think there's kind of some promotions going on. If you'd like, we'll slam into chat. If you're interested, we'll send you more information, but become a pro member. If you like what you heard today, you want more of it, get more of it, become a pro member. So one thing I want to do, if you enjoyed also what you heard today, share it with somebody. We want to build this group. I know we're up to 900 members. We had over 100 people representing 100 different organizations today. Share it with your friend. Get others involved. Have them join us first Thursday of every month. We'd love to have that. And again, so wrap up, expect in your inbox, probably tomorrow, we always do a post-session summary report. We'll include the slide deck. We'll include highlights of today's presentation as well as the recording. So you'll be able to get access to everything we shared today. If you have suggestions for topics or feedback, drop us a line, reach out to collaborative@onstrategyhq.com. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. So one thing I want to do, we always do this before we close, drop into chat. What was the one key takeaway you got from today that you're going to apply within your organization? The one key stealable thing that you heard that you're going to take away. So drop that in the chat, because that's always our promise. You will show up and leave with something that you did not have an hour ago. There we go. AdCar, the risk assessment tools. Love it. I love seeing people get something out of these sessions. So that's fantastic. So again, Vernay, thank you. Rachel, thank you. Carl, thank you. Danielle. It was a fantastic session as always. Being mindful of time, we'll always end on time, which we are doing. If you'd like to stay on, because I think we would love to answer a few more questions. But if you have to drop, we totally understand. Thank you for being part of today's CSO collaborative. And we'll, if we don't see you in the subsequent Thursdays as a pro member, we'll see you next month.
Great. Thanks again. We appreciate it.
So, hey, Ryan, if you're still on, there was I think you had found a couple great questions. I want to queue those up.
Coming your way. I'll put them in chat here. We have about 5 questions, I think it is, that came in. So I'll put them in here and you guys can take them on one by one.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. If you haven't met Ryan, Ryan is behind the scenes running the CSO collaborative, making sure we all get here on time, working with our speakers. So I just want to thank Ryan. Ryan is awesome. He makes this all happen and is an incredible asset to our team. So we already talked about, I think there was a question, how does the framework apply to organizations going through the rapid and difficult change while restructuring after losing a major client? What do you think about rapid change? Any deeper dive on that, Vernay?
I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. This goes back to, everything can't be on fire, right? We go through weekly sessions where we say, what's mission critical? And I think you've got to find that highest level of risk and start tackling it from there. And that also gets you buy-in when you're able to apply a methodology and deal with the biggest challenge you have going on in an organization that has the highest level of risk, and how you go through that process of engaging others to be part of that solution, right? For the most part, everyone wants to be part of the solution. This is why we hear so many different ideas and opinions, right? But we seem to kind of squash those sometimes, which we should invite those to the table. So I think the rapid change is that you need structure for sure about how you're going to go through this change. So those assessments, those early assessments to address those levels of risk, and then building plans based on the level of risk.
Great. What about any advice for change in a union environment?
That's a tough one. I would, obviously, in any organization, there is quite a bit around compliance and in terms of culture, right, and behavior. I think these methodologies apply in general. I'd have to really explore a little bit more of what specifically is happening in a union type situation to be able to speak on that more accurately. But I will say these fundamental methodologies do apply across the board. But again, each organization is unique, whether it's a union or a non-union, right, is where it would take a deeper dive to understand that and give some advice on that.
Yeah. How do we ensure that change management doesn't become a one-time event, but a continuous evolving process that becomes part of our DNA?
Right. And so we talk about that in terms of change management being agile. You've heard of agile type project approaches to project management, but it's very, and Rachel touched on it earlier, it's an iterative approach. But this is the whole purpose of the conversation, right? It's around building a culture for change. It's not building a one-time change management. And I think the more that you practice these methodologies and use these tools and build out this type of communication, it does become part of your culture. It does become part of your ongoing, strategy, integration of strategy. And so it's starting someplace, right, and continuing to make this part of your best practices in your organization, right? You don't launch without your strategic plan. You don't launch without your integrated change management plan. You go back and you revisit that plan every year, every 3 years, right? You're updating that, and you just become part of your pattern and your behavior as you repeat the integration of that change management with your strategic planning.
That's great. If anybody would like to ask a question, take yourself off mute, raise your hand. We'll call on you because we can field questions from chat, but feel free to take yourself off mute and we'll field your question if you like. But Vernay, I think that the idea of making it a living, breathing process and not just a one and done, we check the box on it, I think is so critical to truly bringing about change, enduring change, the adoption of change.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
I think we have a question from the group. Do I see the hand up here somewhere?
Ryan, do we got a hand up?
You do. Stephen, if you want to come off mute, go ahead and ask your question. Thanks for raising your hand.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Can I go ahead and ask?
Yeah, go for it, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, I chipped in a bit late, but again, we are going through change as an organization, and I just assumed a new role from just being a middle manager to an executive position. And but I think the struggle there, as you talk about change, is you begin to lead your peers. How do you manage that kind of change whereby you are now leading with your peers? You're leading your peers. Initially I was a director. I had co-directors, but now being elevated to an executive kind of level position. How do you manage leading your peers in that area and helping people to begin embracing that kind of change?
Excellent question. Well, congratulations, first and foremost, on that elevation to the executive level. And I think you are just an ideal candidate for a champion for change, right? You've seen it firsthand at the level in your organization that you worked. You really have a perspective on it from the individuals at mid-level and below, and then also now sitting at the table and being able to be that voice. So you really can truly help the sponsorship, right? Help develop the sponsor plan. So those are some tools as well out of the toolbox for change management. So taking something fundamental like the sponsorship plan and working with your peers through this as you look through your lens of your strategic plan, I think would be a great start for you, and also a great position for you in terms of visibility for the rest of your organization to see that you are driving and being that champion for change in your organization. So I think you could get, drive a lot of value and take this change management and integration with strategic planning to another level.
Yeah, again, congrats on the role. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So. I think we have one additional question. Just spending a few more moments on, can you talk a little bit more about assessing the risk and identifying what is mission critical?
Correct. So, sorry. So some of the tools out of the toolbox with the pro side, we shared one as the organizational assessment. Those questionnaires and assessments, when they are completed, we run them through a matrix and really be able to come back and share with organizations where they are in terms of risk on the ADKAR model, right? Again, to my point I made earlier, each objective can run its own assessment from an integration of strategic planning. So you can see that this objective may yield a certain risk level, and another objective, yields a different risk level. And so being able to understand that and then build your plans around your people plan, your communication plan, your training plans around each one of those specific initiatives based on where they rank in the risk.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think we'll officially.
I got one last one. I think, Taffy, we've had questions like this that have come up before, but it's in the communication, and that's what communication is critical. I just retyped it in here. It was not a question, but I think it's a very practical how to not get caught in something. So I thought if we want to end it on this note.
Yeah, you want to read it back to us, Ryan?
Just put it in chat.
Okay. So is this a question around communication and changing maybe the thought process and behavior of leaders? I just want to make sure
I think so, Renee. We've had questions like this that have come up in the past about communication and the critical role of it, and people having trouble with the actions behind it or the consistency. Mm-hmm. So when I read Taffy's comment that she put in it was a great, you get caught in the buzzwords. That's the easy part of it. The hard work is actually doing. And I thought maybe you'd have some good advice and practicality behind that.
Yeah, it goes back to pulling those tools, right, and methodologies. You've got to have something tangible, right? I think we all have been in business long enough that we know the buzzwords and can use them. But being able to be part of the solution you want to see and bringing tools and bringing suggestions and recommendations. And I think Taffy was also, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but someone put in the chat, start with the toughest nut to crack, right? And so it's like, you know, you've got to, it goes back to those saying of, you know, how do you eat the elephant, right? One bite at a time. So find that area where you think you could have the most success. It may be small, it may not even be high risk, but if you can start to engage the individual and get them involved and start to win over in terms of the relationship and the communication. And these communication plans are helpful too in terms of who's the audience. The audience is not always the end user. Sometimes it's leadership, right? And what is the message and how do you craft the message, right? And understanding the dynamic and the psychology of people and how they think. But if I can address one issue with you, and it could be very small, it starts to open up that dialogue. It starts to open up that communication and that trust. And oftentimes from a leadership standpoint, we tend to, you know, we tend to not really fully understand what all leaders are going through. And they need help, right? We all need help, myself included. And so, but when someone comes to me with a potential solution of something that's going to help my real-time current situation, it opens up. It kind of takes, how do we get the barriers down is the key. And each organization, each individual is so different and so unique, but start looking at ways in which you can improve a situation with an individual and start just taking it small steps, you know. And it takes time, right? We've got, you know, part of the you know, organization's on fire and then we're dealing with, oh yeah, it does. So you just made a very interesting point, Taffin, when you said 2 years. Rachel, we worked through your transformation. How long? It was
about, yep, it was a long process.
And this was an organization that was very engaging, very welcoming about the whole process. So if you're getting resistance, it could take longer than that. So that's part of the reality is change takes time, right? But start with the tools, start with the building blocks. And you don't see, back to my architectural example, you don't see a building go up in a day. Well, we'd be a little bit nervous about it if we did, right? So it takes time to design that thing, make sure the specs are there, make sure it's going to be compliant. Make sure we thought about the individuals that are involved, right? That's going to be moving throughout the organization. What's the impact of those individuals? All of that comes into play. And so it takes time. And thank you, Penny, is definitely a continuous process, right? So I always say to my group, we're all lifelong learners, right? No matter how many years we've been at this, right? We're learning something new every day.
I think today's topic definitely struck a chord with all of us. You know, it strikes our heart chord, you know, attitudes and behaviors and perceptions. And at the end of the day, it's our people that implement strategy. And people are such a vital part of the equation that we just don't overlook it, don't oversimplify it. You know, these are.
Yeah. And one last point, I just heard something yesterday. I was actually watching a movie before I fell asleep, which is only about 10 minutes. So every movie has about 10 minutes of my attention before I fall asleep, right? And it was really talking about, and it's taken us a little bit off topic, but very appropriate in terms of sometimes there are communication gaps, and those gaps exist because maybe it's generational. And one of the individuals said, well, you know, this generation is trying to bring about so much change, right? And they want to change things. They want to teach us things. And the response to that was, as long as we're learning, does it matter who's bringing about the change? So whether it's the next generation, the third generation, fourth generation, if we're learning and it's allowing us to improve and better our organizations, open up the door, invite them in.
Perfect way to wrap our day. Perfect way to wrap our session. So, Vernay, thank you. Rachel, Carl, Danielle, thank you again for hanging out a little bit afterwards. Thank everyone who stayed on. And again, we'll be sending out the after session summary report tomorrow. And we've captured all the questions that we did not answer. Again, thank you, all of you, for joining us today, both in the audience, great questions, and all of our speakers. And we'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.